why does your activewear fit like trash? Sportswear in and of itself is fundamentally based on a proper fit, because sportswear, unlike other types of fashion, is solely based on how we feel and how we are able to perform in our garments. So how can we as brand entrepreneurs create better fitting clothing so that we can enhance how our customers look and feel in our clothing? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be discussing in today's episode. My name is Shadi. I am the co-founder and creative director of FittDesign, the world's first digital sportswear fashion design agency. We've helped tens of thousands of different products to be launched on the market over the last 10 years and thousands of brands to do it. Leggings, the first and biggest issue that I always see is going to be the front rise measurement, which is graded horribly. So what is the front rise? If we were to take a legging, lay it out flat on the floor, the front rise is the distance between where the top of the waistband is all the way down in a straight line when laid flat to the bottom of the crotch. So how do we solve this? In general, your grading between sizes when laid flat on the floor should be 0.375 inches. Anything more than that for the front rise measurement is going to end up with excess fabric on the garment, which is just going to look super unsightly. The second mistake that I typically see in leggings is going to be the front rise and the back rise are exactly the same measurement. And this is the hallmark of a very poorly cut garment. Why does this happen? That's because the front rise and the back rise are actually the same measurement, which is incorrect. And the last biggest mistake that I see on leggings is going to be excess fabric on the ankle, and I hate to see this. This is typically where you're trying to go either too long or too short. My best recommendation for the general public is going to be a 7/8 length legging, which means an inseam of around 27.5 inches. And also make sure that you taper in the leg correctly. On a size small, my recommendation would be a calf half width or a ankle opening half width of around 3.375 is ideal. Number 2 is performance shirts. These have two main issues that I typically see, and this is going to be the puckering or the really weird wrinkles that happen underneath the armpit, and this is because of two main reasons. Number 1, if we were to look at the way that a sleeve sits into a garment, and this is predominantly an issue with set-in sleeve, we end up with way too much excess fabric on the armpit region. If that pattern is not constructed correctly and it doesn't account for the fact that our back armhole, it needs to be cut a little bit differently than our front armhole. It should be cut a little bit wider and less deep in than our back or our front armhole. At the same time, if we have a raglan sleeve, then the challenge there is typically that the armhole is too tight and it's cut way too high up, which ends up pinching at the chest. And what happens is the chest is the right measurement, or might be even a little bit longer or wider than it needs to be. So there's excess fabric, but it's too high up. So that excess fabric is being brought up and out, which pushes the fabric out, which just looks super unsightly. Mistake number 3 is going to be with sports bras, and this is predominantly with the underbust completely digging in. Well, it comes down to that you're using a elastic waistband that's way too narrow. If you look at it this way, if I took a needle and I pricked you with it, my recommendation would be go for a waistband that is no less than around 1.25 inches tall. That's the ideal sweet spot. And of course, add structure into your waistband. You can have some sort of fusing to the waistband or an elastic liner on the waistband, but make sure that it's not overly rigid and it's not overly structured. The second mistake that I always see is this, where the armhole meets the bust, like the side of the bust. It just doesn't dig in correctly. It either is way too far out or it's way too far in. If it's too far out, what happens is it digs into the meaty part of where your body is, right? We carry a lot of fat around this area, especially with women. So what happens is you're basically putting the bound edge finish, which is the finishing of the armhole of the waistband or the bra, and it's digging right into the meatiest part of this section, which is there. My recommendation would be curve your armhole in a little bit, but not overdo it to the point where you're showing a little bit too much side boob by actually dropping the armhole. So you want to have an armhole drop on a racer back bra of a size small for around 7.25 inches, a perpendicular armhole depth, and a chest width of around 13.25 is going to be ideal, especially if you have a bounding or a binding finish. Number 4 is going to be with joggers. These are going to be specifically sweatpants that are a little bit more relaxed, and we actually just had this problem with a customer, which we resolved with a little bit of a genius method. And the challenge was that we had a relaxed pair of joggers and they looked perfect on the front and on the knees and on the ankles. Everything was perfect, but on the back there was just too much excess fabric, which ended up making the garment look like a diaper, like someone had, unfortunately couldn't wait to go to the bathroom and they filled up their diaper. What we realized was it wasn't an issue of the rise measurement. So reducing the back rise wasn't just the play to go. It was going to come down to fixing the sewing pattern. So what is a sewing pattern? The sewing pattern are the different pieces of fabric that are sewn together to create the final garment. If we were to take the sleeve pattern, which we discussed in a previous point, you'd see that it kind of looks very different than what you would see when actually wearing it. And that's what a sewing pattern is. Those curves really play a lot into how the garment comes together. And typically what you notice with a jogger pattern, the back right leg would have what is known as a back rise. And the back rise essentially looks like this ladle. It's kind of like this J or this inverse J, depending on how you're looking at it. And the way that this J is cut, right? The bottom of the J is where the crotch is, and then that comes up all the way to the top of the J, which is where it meets the waistband. If that J is cut too flat, curve of the J is cut out too much, that excess fabric is what ends up bunching up. So what we tend to see is we will reduce, or we'll make that J deeper, making the curve of the J more intense. So that's how we resolve that issue. Number 5 is going to be compression shorts. These can either be ladies biker shorts or men's compression shorts. And the biggest two issues that I always see are going to be where the waistband and where that meets the actual right leg and the left leg causes excess fabric, or puckering is what we call it, to appear. The best way to achieve this is if you have a waistband that's around 12 inches wide, you want to have no more than 0.5 inches of length where your right and left leg are. We call this in fashion ease, and ease is necessary. It's just because you have a fabric that's, let's just say, 10 inches long, doesn't mean you can't sew it to fabric that's like 10.5 inches. That ease is what allows range of motion. But if we have too much ease, that's where puckering happens. And at the same time, the other thing that I see is where, because you have those issues with the way that the right and the left leg, or the right and the left section of the legs are cut, you might have a leg opening that's either too tight or too loose. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are using the right opening and the right inseam, so that those things combined allow the garment to sit beautifully on the leg. Another key thing that you want to go onto that is make sure that the elastic that you use, or the threading that you use, has a little bit of elasticity. If it's too structured and too rigid, it's going to cause that like pulling in effect, because there's a mismatch of tension. Last but not least are going to be the men's tank tops. And for this, I see two main issues. Number one is just the neck doesn't sit correctly at all. Main issue is because of two things. Number one, either the neck is cut too wide, the back neckline might be a little bit too deep in, and the shoulder length might be a bit too high up, which causes the neck to kind of like move up a little bit. And the bound seam, which is the finishing, which is like this piece of fabric that is stitched to the edge of the armhole and the edge of the neckline, is cut too wide. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that the bound edge is just cut a little bit shorter, and you force the fabric to kind of like stick closer to the skin, and that just makes the aesthetic of the wearer look much better. The second main issue that we tend to see is where the chest is too wide, and you end up with this beautiful tank top, and then the chest is kind of going out. Boom. This can be solved by getting the right chest measurement and knowing exactly where it's going to hit. Well guys, that is it. That is a wrap on this episode. That's been my key mistakes that I see in the main sections and main product categories of sportswear. And if you would like to see me go deeper into some of your favorite product categories, let me know in the comments which categories you want to see me discuss in the future. And if you want my personal opinion on how you can improve the fit of your collection, perhaps you have a bunch of samples from a manufacturer that you want my opinion on in terms of how to resolve it. I promise you, I've done this time and time again. I'd be happy to hop on a video call with you and help you resolve those issues and give you the exact measurements that you need to perfect your fit so that you can create the perfect product. Guys, I say this from the very bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of FittDesign TV. Until next week's episode, stay awesome.